Hi everyone, welcome to our Thursday Tech Spark. My name is Tao, an account manager here at Meanwhile, and we are joined with Kai, our product manager.
Hi everyone.
Yeah, so today we'll be discussing the TAA compliance and how Meanwhile can support you guys. And the reason we chose this topic for today's Tech Spark session is because we've been getting a lot of questions from our distributors about whether a product is TAA compliant. So Kai, let's start off with the basics first. Could you explain to us what is TAA?
Yeah, so I think for a lot of us in the power industry, it's a foreign term. So TAA stands for the Trade Agreements Act, and it is basically a government trading act. And this, for the history lessons, the act originally started with the World Trade Organization, and it is also part of the government procurement agreement that's part of the WTO. So essentially, this agreement is meant to open the business for government to international competition. That means, for the government-related projects, that worldwide international suppliers can also provide and compete in these bids and contracts. And over 40 of the WTO members participated in the GPA. However, I underlined here China did not, even though they're part of WTO. And this is very impactful because China is, key supplier for components and services. So we'll talk more on the countries later. But TAA, Trade Agreements Act, is basically the U.S. government version to work with the WTO, and it was implemented in 1979, and it is intended to foster fair and open international trade. And then it is intended to be fair trade with the WTO members, and then also opening international trade for some of the slow developing countries. So this is overall a very positive and very good initiative worldwide. So essentially, the TAA prohibits federal agencies from purchasing from countries that are not in the WTO GPA program. And then it also locally, one of the benefits is that it waives off other discriminatory procurement laws, such as Buy American Act. So if the supplier or the components are TAA compliant, then they don't have to follow certain acts that restricts government from procuring certain products. And so in essence, it just meant that the federal agencies cannot buy items that came from outside the US or outside of a TAA compliant country.
Gotcha. No, thanks for the history lesson, Kai.
Yeah.
Now that we know what TAA is, what does it mean to be TAA compliant?
Yeah, so to be TAA compliant, that means one of two things. So either the product is manufactured wholly or grown wholly in the U.S. or a TAA designated country, or it has gone through what we call the substantial transformation in the U.S. or in a TAA designated country.
Yeah, gotcha. And what are these designated countries?
Yeah, so there's a long list of designated countries. Let me see, over 170 different countries on this list. And if we look at it, it's easier to identify which countries are not designated. It's a much shorter list. So the TAA designated countries include the WTO GPA countries, so the 40 plus countries that participated in the government procurement agreements. And then it also includes free trade agreement countries that have these trade agreements with US. And along these countries on the list are what we call the least developed countries. Some third world countries or slow developing countries are also on this list to include it in the competition pool for these government contracts. And then lastly, it's the Caribbean Basin countries on this list.
Okay, gotcha. And then I also noticed that you mentioned two things. Products that are sold to the US government must be manufactured or substantially transformed. Could you give us an example of what's considered as substantially transformed?
Yeah. So if some parts and material come from non-TSTA designated countries or out of the US, I think in today's world that's inevitable, right? But as long as these components or material go through a significant change in the product's form, character, or function, and this is something that the substantial transformation is used in many acts, not just the TAA. but also, it's related to the tariff rates and all that. So to go through the transformation, I have some examples here. So a qualifying example, for say a bakery in the US, for some reason they're supplying to the government or they need to be TA compliant. So they're sourcing sugar from country A, flour from country B. These countries probably are not TA compliant, but they're sourcing the dairy products and then the nuts from TA compliant countries. So even though the some of the components used and material used are not TA compliant, it goes through this substantial transformation. So it turns the sugar flour into a cookie. The ending product is no longer the same. I think in the importing and exporting, we use the HTS code to justify and to double check, right? So the sugar and flour definitely has a different characteristic or function as cookie, right? So this cookie is now can be considered as TA compliant. However, for not qualifying, is for a manufacturer of shirts in the U.S. That they buy the shirt from say Southeast Asia countries that's not on the TAA designated countries list, and then they buy the packaging here and then they wrap it together, and then now they label this as made in USA. So that's definitely not good, not okay, and it is not a TA because it's still a shirt. It didn't go through the substantial transformation.
Okay, gotcha. So let's say in terms of power supplies, does that mean, let's say we buy a transformer from China and a capacitor from Japan, but we do the final assembly in Taiwan? Would that product be considered TA compliant?
Yeah, yeah, of course, that would be the qualifying example, right? So country of origin, or based on the certificate of origin is Taiwan,
Mhm.
even though the components are not 100% from Taiwan or TA compliant country, as long as it's manufactured in Taiwan, it goes through this substantial transformation in Taiwan, then it will still count towards the TAA.
Okay,
Yeah.
I see. And who's in charge of making sure like a product is like, TA compliant?
Yeah, so of course the TA compliant products and then the TA Act is catered towards government contracts and government procurement, right? So there's no really like certifications out there that says, this product has a TA certified or whatever. But the government purchasing the procurement, they will do their due diligence and then they will conduct random inspections and then searches to make sure that the supply chain is providing what's claimed. They can say that they're TA compliant, but maybe in truth they're not, and there will be severe consequences as a result if they're not. Yeah.
Yeah, no, thanks for walking us through kind of the backgrounds and the requirements. And then my next question is like, why is TAA compliance important for us and particularly our customers?
Mhm. Yeah, so TA compliance is important because first of all, it's eligibility for the government contracts, right? So for example, the GSA schedule is what the government use to post the contracts, and then the sellers can use to bid for these contracts, and then they can claim if their service and products are TAA compliant. So currently, as of 2025, government agencies cannot purchase non-TAA products for contracts for any contract above 194,000 USD. And this value, I put an asterisk there because this value may change. As of about 4 years ago, this value was, I think, 180,000. So it changes depending on the situation, how the government determines if they need to increase this or to decrease it. So as you can see, this is catered towards the high value contracts. And this means that, for suppliers and vendors that they want to compete in these high value government contracts, then they must be TAA compliant. And of course, you asked earlier, like who's in charge of making sure, it's TA compliant and all that. There's no certification, but it is the supplier's job. So they need to do their due diligence. They need to train their employees. They need to make sure the products they're buying from or securing from are TA compliant, or they have to like they do production in the US, then they go through that substantial transformation, right? So yeah, there are courses out there that covers like for the suppliers to train their quality control people, to train their procurement people, to train their certification people to make sure that they follow the TA compliance. And then so the GSE schedule contracts, it's not just strictly like, typically when we think about government contracts, we think about more of the, it covers very general, the public sector demands. So it can be very involved in our daily lives as well. Can cover things such as, public school. If the public school receive funding from a government initiative, then if the contract value is high enough, it will also require the TAA compliance. So it's not just limited to strictly, government's internal operation, internal business. And then on top of the GSA schedule, a lot of the Department of Defense contracts also require TAA compliance, or the Buy American Act or other acts. But TAA compliance can be used to waive the other discriminatory procurement laws. So yeah, and as mentioned earlier, it's TAA compliance is very important to be double checked and made sure so that we avoid penalties and risks with the government agencies. And as supplier ourselves for Meanwhile, in our case, we supply a lot of the components. We don't really deal directly with the government. So a lot of the times the certificate of origin is enough. It stops there for our customers when they ask us like, where's the COO? And then we provide the COO to the customer, and then if they need supporting documents, then we can help with that later on. But penalties, some of the penalties are very severe. So it starts with like the bare minimum is like, just fines. That's the least severe case. But more severely, the supplier, the company can be disbarred from doing any future businesses or bidding any of these contracts with the government if they found out that it's not compliant. They claim it is compliant. Yeah, and outside of these government contracts and projects, I think TAA compliance can also benefit most companies by building trust and reputation as a federal contractor. So TAA compliance basically opens doors for the companies to work with government and be a federal contractor. And if they utilize that, they brand it and they can kind of build on the brand image, right? And lastly, of course, this goes back to the core principle or reason why the TAA program was put in place is to support the US economy and then to foster fair trade with our trading agreement countries. Yeah.
Yeah, so now that we know like why TA's compliance is important, is Meanwhile currently TAA compliant?
Yes, so as I briefly mentioned earlier, Meanwhile, we don't really deal directly with the government. We don't sell to government contracts directly, but a lot of our customers do. And in recent years, we've gotten more and more inquiries as to, is Meanwhile TAA compliant or is this specific product TAA compliant? So in terms of Meanwhile and TAA compliance, Meanwhile, we are a Taiwan-based country. And Taiwan is on the TAA designated countries list. So I think we just touched on the designated countries list earlier very briefly, but just to add on to that, so in the power supply world and most relevance, most of the power supplies are manufactured in Asia. And out of the major Asian countries, only Taiwan, Japan, and South Korea are on the designated TAA list. China, Vietnam, Thailand, Malaysia, Philippines, those are not on the TAA compliance list. So Meanwhile, we do have factories in China as well. So the products we made in China cannot be used for these TAA compliance bids or contracts. However, for our products made in Taiwan, we can safely say that they meet the TAA criteria, and then as long as our customer ensure that the products they're buying from us are coming from Taiwan, and then we can provide the certificate of origin. So to do that, Meanwhile, we're world's #1 standard power supply manufacturer. We have very complete documentation and certifications in place. So we can trace our supply chain and trace the production, provide all the necessary documents for our customers to meet this TAA compliance requirements. Yeah. And then, and just general rule of thumb for our products, so I did mention we have, multiple factories around the world, right? So just how to distinguish the Taiwan-made products. So Taiwan, we typically manufacture the higher power products. The production lines are set up that way to support the higher power product production. So for like enclosed, which is one of our major categories, for the enclosed type power supplies, if the power is above 1,000 watts, it's very likely that it is manufactured in Taiwan. So there are some exceptions, but those are less popular and niche. So most of the major enclosed type categories that's over 1,000 watts are made in Taiwan. For the open frame type is another popular, but unfortunately, we don't currently have any TAA compliant solutions. We're working on, potential of manufacturing in Taiwan for some of the models, but that's down the road. And then for DIN rail, we currently offer, our popular SDR series, and some of the TDR series are manufactured in Taiwan. So that doesn't follow the 1,000 watt rule. The rest of the DIN rail are unfortunately made in China, but SDR and TDR are some of the models that's catered towards the US market and very suitable. So we do have those. And then if you jumping ahead, the selected model section, we also have some models that we recently added to the Taiwan factories manufacturing list. So we're adding the WDR 120, 240, and 480 to the Taiwan manufacturer as well. And then for modular power is another one that we are very heavily invested in the US. So luckily, the NMP product family that covers 650 and 1,200 watt front ends are TAA compliant made in Taiwan. And off the rack power, high power units are manufactured in Taiwan, TAA compliance. And then for the rest, I think it's mostly Asia or China and Philippines, unfortunately. But we are continuously adding, like for example, the RSP 320 500 and the UHP 200 to 750 watt models. We've added those to transfer those to be made in Taiwan recently. So yeah, if Tao, reach out to Tao here if you guys have any questions about whether the model you're buying specifically is from Taiwan or not.
Yeah. And besides the models that you already went over that are
Mhm.
manufactured in Taiwan, do we have any plans to add more in the future?
Yeah, so we have RD teams at all of the factory sites, and Taiwan is mainly in charge of the higher power and more sophisticated products. So we're continuously adding and developing products for higher power and by the Taiwan team and manufacturing in Taiwan. So it is something that we'll continue to support. In addition to that, such as the selected models I've listed here, we are also over time we evaluate if certain models are suitable to be transferred to be made in Taiwan, whether it's for tariff reasons or for TAA compliance or for specific customer needs. Yeah, so it is something that we're definitely invested in and will continue to add and support. Yeah.
Gotcha. Yeah, like I mentioned again, guys, if you have any or working on any government related projects and need really help confirming if the Meanwhile product meets TA requirements, please reach out to your sales rep and then we can help you there. So Kai, besides our standard product offering, what other services can we provide that can help support customers that are working on any government related projects?
Yeah, so for the standard products that we just covered, they are fulfilling the first criteria, right? They're made in a TAA compliant designated country. So for if customer cannot source any TA designated country power supplies, we do have our local value added center in Kansas City, Missouri, where we do a lot of the system level integration for our customers. And for these products, definitely not, I wouldn't say all of them meet the criteria, but for some of the projects, we are converting the product HTS code and product function and type. So for those products, we can declare the country of origin as US, right? For services that we do at the value added center, I've shown here some examples where we're building power supplies into a charging dock for warehouse robot. That's a completely different category or completely different type of product altogether, and it's working with the robot together as an end system, not just the power itself. And then we can also, put open frame power supplies. I mentioned earlier, we don't have any open frame solutions right now. But if we put open frame into a larger system, that ends up being a different feature, HTS or function, then it's also possible to overcome the TAA regulation challenge. And then lastly, it's a system level integration. We do a lot at the value-added center, but we also do a lot of the standard product development as well. We recently invested into a couple projects that we're developing as design in USA and manufacturing in USA. So those products will all also have TA compliance.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
And could you give us an example of something or a project that you worked on that's built by BAC that we discussed earlier that could be considered as substantially transformed?
Yeah, so if we just look on the slide here, the bottom right project, this is for a industrial automation application. It's powering a machine mobile machinery, right? So traditionally, the customer just had the power supply, our UHP 2500 series to power the motor. But what we ended up doing for this customer is that we're putting the power supply and charger inside of an enclosure to turn this together with batteries, turn this into a UPS system. So if we look at the diagram here, the enclosure that's shown, they're sourced from Taiwan. And then we also have the two power supplies inside. The bigger power supply is a UHP, which is manufactured in Taiwan. But the challenge is the smaller charger unit. For this wattage range, meanwhile, or most of our competitors, they're manufactured in China. So we put this charger, we have to put this charger inside this case. And this customer specifically is not TAA, like he's not trying to do a government contract, but this is just example, if they were to do TAA, this would be compliant. But so in this case, the charger is just a component that goes inside of the overall UPS system, which follows a different type of certifications and HTS altogether. So there are some gray areas and some things that we need to clarify, with the customer, with their purpose and their application. But I think if the criteria align, and then if this customer was trying to do a TAA projects or contract, then this would also meet the requirement. Yeah.
Gotcha, I see. So let's say Meanwhile, Power Solution helps us do the final assembly. Then afterwards, who does the certification, or what does the certification process kind of look like?
So for the TA compliance, as I mentioned earlier, there's really no certification. But most of all, it's the certificate of origin that is work with the CBP when we import export that we need to provide and then get certified. So there are agencies out there that will handle those. So it's for customers specifically that needs this kind of proof, then we can do it. But otherwise, if it's for domestic consumption, domestic demand for the U.S. government, products we build, we can support them with the process and what we did to build it, and then the full documentation on the production SOPs, things like that, to prove that it has gone through this substantial transformation. Again, it goes back to the substantial transformation term, whether or not it's a very non-specific definition, a very vague term, but there are definitely agencies out there that are inspecting you and looking at whether you really meet the requirement or not. Yeah.
Yeah, and that pretty much concludes our text part for today. Just to kind of conclude, what we went over today about TA compliance kind of refers to meeting the requirements of the Trade Agreements Act. It's a law in the U.S. that governs which products can be sold to the U.S. federal government. So the product first must be manufactured or considered substantially transformed in a TAA compliant country. Like Kai earlier mentioned. And the reason we are kind of touching on this topic is because Meanwhile is able to kind of provide that support and help if you guys do have, any projects that are sensitive in terms of TA compliant requirements. One is we carry, the higher power product series made from Taiwan, as well as we can provide the extra services from Meanwhile Power Solutions. So, don't hesitate to reach out to your sales rep, any questions, and that pretty much wraps up our Tech Spark for today. And then if you guys have any questions for our technical team, don't hesitate to reach out to Brian, Kareem, or Han. And thanks, Kai, for joining us today's
Thank you for
Tech
hosting the
session. Yeah. And then please join us for the next Tech Spark, which will happen on July 31st at 11 a.m. Pacific time. And then Ivy and Kareem will be touching upon the topic of understanding the differences in Meanwell product warranty, life cycle, and MTBF.
Yeah.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you. Thank you,
See you next
everyone.
time.